The transition to 3D was truly an amazing time in gaming. 3D gaming was the new frontier, the undiscovered land, some amazing third descriptive. So many franchises had to completely reimagine the way they were executed, now that the matter of an additional dimension was a thing. Not every franchise stuck the landing, but icons like Mario, Sonic, and the topic of this video, Zelda, all nailed their jump into the third dimension. Sonic didn't have a rough transition to 3D. People need to stop saying that. Zelda was arguably a much more complicated game than your typical 2D platformer. You have combat, puzzles, open worlds, and in A Link to the Past, you already had some pseudo third dimension shenanigans with different floors and dungeons. But I don't think that it's a hot take to say that Zelda had a lot more mechanics that needed to be adapted into the third dimension when compared to its simpler counterparts. I also believe Zelda had a lot more to prove with this new title. Zelda 1 was a fun romp, Zelda 2 was a mixed bag, and A Link to the Past was considered a masterpiece. So whatever title came out next would establish whether Zelda was an all-star franchise, or if it would fade away like many other franchises had before. Needless to say, Ocarina of Time ended up being pretty good, only being called one of the greatest games of all time. Not that big a deal. Being the first game in the third dimension means that Ocarina of Time had a lot to teach players. Not only did the developers need to find a way of being able to control Link in the third dimension, they needed to find a way to teach players how to control Link in the third dimension. Kokiri Forest and the Great Deku Tree, I think, served as a perfect tutorial for not just Ocarina of Time, but to 3D gaming as a whole. I can only imagine what it was like for gamers back when this game first came out. Watching the scene from Navi's POV, flying around the forest, interacting with different characters trying to find Link, you really get a good idea for her character. She's friendly, curious, a little clumsy, a great introduction to this character who will be by your side for your journey. I know she gets a bad rap, but I actually love her. And I'm tired of the Navi hate. Can we talk about how genius it was to start the player with an overhead view of the game when they first get control of Link? This only happens at the start. You come back to his house later and it has a normal perspective. It makes the player think that maybe this game will actually play like the old games, only for you to walk outside and be met with a full 360-degree view of the world around you. Just a fun little thing the game does that I really appreciate. But now that the player is in full control, how does the game teach us how to play? Well, Navi and other characters will do a bulk of the heavy lifting through dialogue, but there are also plenty of signs along the way to help you if that isn't enough. Right at the start of the game, Link is called to the Great Deku Tree to speak with him, and everyone is like, wow, that's so cool. Then you have this stick of butter Mido. He's like, nah, that's cap. Get a sword and shield and then maybe I'll let you through. Unless you use glitches, which apparently isn't that hard to do, you ain't getting past him unless you find a pointy stick and a piece of wood. Allow me to introduce the concept of capitalism. You live in the woods, you're surrounded by wood, but you need to have that piece of wood with a fancy mark on it. That'll be 40 rupees, please. Now you know how capitalism works. Our broke behinds aren't buying that beautiful piece of wood anytime soon, so let's get a head start and find that sword. A little bit of exploring will find you a sign that talks about these so-called training grounds. That sounds promising, so let's check that out. Another nifty sign tells us how to crawl through small passages, and we are off to the races. There's some boulders ripped straight out of Indiana Jones here, so with some good timing, or in my case, blind luck, we can avoid all the boulders and find a big old box. While we've been interacting with the world, we've learned that the magical button, known as the A button, can be used to interact with all kinds of things. Talking to people, reading signs. So thanks to that handy dandy prompt up top, we know to press it again and open this bad boy to get our prize, the Kokiri sword. Time to wake up, samurai. We got a city to burn. From our quest alone to get this letter opener, we are well on our way to being able to afford that shiny piece of wood we've wanted so badly. Also helps that we robbed a man blind, but that is irrelevant. By the time we hop and skip our way back to Capitalist City, we have more than enough floor rupees to buy this thing. Oh yeah, now this is pod racing. Mido is no match for our drift and he bows down before us. Yeah, I know I'm everyone's favorite. We roll in the town thinking we're all that and then bam, evil plants. I could cower in fear, but then I remember something. Back when we left the training grounds, there were plants there too. I cut them with my sword. The game gave me a safe place to practice my weed whacking skills before throwing me into the deep end. Unlocking the player's third eye, these plants go down like grass under a mower and we get some handy dandy sticks for our trouble. Oh mama, that's a big tree. I know we saw him in the opening, but seeing him compared to Link is pretty wacky, not gonna lie. He may be a tree, but he's a pretty good hype man. tells the player how cool they are. So brave, so smart, now get inside me, quote, the great Deku Tree. Well, everything I've done up until this point has been because this guy told me to. So inside we go. Right off the bat, I want to talk about how immediately this first dungeon emphasizes its verticality. We could never do something like this on the Super Nintendo. But here, we can look up and down and see how big this place really is. Points right off the bat, using the hardware the way it was meant to be used. Players' attention is pointed in two places right away, through the big spiderweb on the floor and the means of ascending, whether by the ramp, ladder, or vines. The game gives you plenty of push to make sure you go in the right direction. Ocarina of Time dungeon design has a lot of verticality in most of its dungeons. Not to say that future games don't have tall dungeons, but they also have dungeons that spread out more, are more horizontal. In Ocarina of Time, most of the dungeons, not all, but most feature a lot of verticality. Since the player is encouraged to climb up, they are railroaded into finding the dungeon map. Having this near the start will greatly help players make their way through this place. Most players will continue along the path for now, as the only other path is guarded by these big old spider things. You could try to climb up, but you won't have a fun time. So instead, the game pushes you forward to a room just a little bit further down, where the game teaches the players the importance of the shield. In this room, it's just you and this other chump. Thanks to some advice you got from Papa Deku Tree, you know Navi can give you some helpful advice through the push of a button. So once you remember that, you ask her for some advice and she tells you to bounce back this scrub's attacks. Well, how do I do that? That sounds like a job for my handy dandy piece of wood. Thank you, capitalism. You pull that bad boy out, reflect his nut, and learn a valuable lesson along the way. Guarding can be pretty helpful. Tuck that one away for later, G. Taking him out leads the players to their first major dungeon item, the slingshot. This item is going to be crucial, not just for this dungeon, but for the foreseeable future. This gives the players some ranged defensive prowess. But now you're kind of stuck. You sunk the platform on the way in, and you can't climb back to the door. But never fear, you turn around and see that there is a ladder stuck up in the air that we can lock onto. It only makes sense that we give that new toy a spin, and what do you know? It clears the path. With this shiny new string on a stick, we can take out those spiders blocking the vines, since we've learned that we can hit things from far away, and thanks to that, we're able to make our way up to the top. When we get here, the only other door is one that leads to the compass, an item that shows treasure chests on the maps. So now where do we go? Well, back in the main room, there are all these paths pointing to the center of the room with more big old spiders blocking the path. At this point, there have always been spiders in the way of where we need to go, and these little balconies are sticking out towards the center of the room. The game is pushing you towards the center. Then you remember, Navi made a point to point out that big old hole in the floor earlier. The game manages to push the player exactly where they need to go, jumping off the top of the floor and breaking through the webs into the basement. Unless you're me and you missed. One thing you may have noticed, or not, depending on if you went for the compass, are the lit torches. At first, the player isn't sure what to do with this, but through some reasonable deduction, the player can learn that those wooden sticks they've been carrying can actually catch on fire. This is used to light other torches. But what if other things can be burned? Down in the basement, there are those webs blocking the path. The player's seen these webs can be destroyed through other means, but we don't have another 3 stories we can fling ourselves from to get through. Looking around, all we see is a lit torch. With a little bit of rocket science, I think most players will eventually get the idea to burn their way through. And lo and behold, it actually works. When in doubt, arson is your friend. After another fight with a Deku scrub who starts blabbering about math and other scrubs, the door doesn't open in this room. That's weird. That worked last time. Well, what's different now? Well, there's this big old eyeball on the wall. If only I had some way of interacting with faraway targets. Wait a minute. Shoot it in the eye and be on your way, soldier. The next room introduces a new obstacle. Water. But Navi says we can go underwater apparently. Thanks to that nifty AI icon up top, we see we can dive. After flopping around like a fish on a boat, players will find a big old button. Shove your whole body onto it, lower the water, ride the platform, and push a block. Few more fire-related puzzles and we end up back in the main basement. But now we're on that elevated level we couldn't get to before. Is that a block? I just learned I could push those. Commence pushing. That was fun. What else is up here? More web. Well, I need fire to burn it. But the fire's down there. Wait, I just pushed a block down there. I just learned I can climb blocks. Oh my god, science. Another fall of doom and we're almost at the end game. 3 scrubs. Why does this seem familiar? Hold on. I'm getting a flashback. The other scrub. He foretold this. The code. Use the code. Some sequential blocking leads to an utter defeat on their end, and we enter a big room. The camera shows a perspective looking down on the player before cutting back to control of Link. In the distance, you even see a faint glowing thing. What do? I try walking around? Nothing. I know there's something above me since the camera at the beginning alluded to it, but what do? The game wants me to do something, just like Navi did at the start of the dungeon. Pressing that fancy up button and bam, we be looking. Oh man, that's a big spider. The first thing I'm drawn to is that big eye. What did I do last time I saw a big eye? Well, I shot it with my slingshot. I wonder. Oh man, he's stunned. Now what? Stab him. Yeah, stab him. Once again, the game has taught the player what they need to do in a way that is satisfying and not overbearing. We kill the bug, get our trophy, and head out. A job well done. Ocarina of Time is a game that does so much for Zelda. No, not just Zelda. Gaming as a whole. It pioneered the adventure formula in a 3D space for many franchises. Its ideas like Z-targeting would go on to be used in so many other games, it isn't even funny. It guides players with a hand that is both firm and maybe a little overbearing at times, but it needed to be. Teaching players how to navigate this new wacky world of 3D was a big job, but yet, Ocarina of Time managed to do it in a way that just about everyone was able to understand. Ocarina of Time is a game that is joining the Kiwi Game Registry as a game that will be remembered. This game may not be perfect, but it is pretty darn close to it. Until next time, I've been your favorite fruit, Kiwi, and hey, take care of yourselves, okay?